All right, welcome back. You're tuned in and listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. I'm your host. My name is Sharona. Now we're going to talk some fantasy football. I'm so excited to have Katie on the show. We did a live auction draft, going for two auction draft on Wednesday night. It was so much fun. I accidentally coined the phrase erotic smash mouth, which has been kind of a big thing. Katie, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you so much, Sharona, for having me on. This is exciting, and yeah, I don't think that it was all that accidental. It was a wonderful coined phrase, and I love it.
We had a lot of fun. It went over 5 hours. I didn't realize that until the next morning. I don't know about you. Fortunately, you're on vacation. I was feeling a little bit rough, but it was definitely a lot of fun. So tell everybody just a little bit about who you are. You've been in fantasy football for a pretty good while. I want to find out how you got started in it.
Well, I got started in 2012, so it hasn't really been a long time. I've always been a big football fan. I coached youth sports for 14 years, boys baseball, football, and basketball, and I refereed all. So I've got a strategic mind, and a friend of mine who hosts a reality TV show charity every year asked me if I wanted to join their fantasy football league, redraft league, and I had 3 days to prepare for the draft, but I was like, I know all the players, so how hard could it be? And that's when I joined. I read a few things on the internet, got prepared as best as I could, had a very bad losing season, found out there wasn't very many trades in redraft, and there wasn't any real way to overcome a bad draft. I didn't know who to pick up off the waiver wire, but I buckled down, and in my second year, I really did a lot of studying and mock drafts and ended up with more than 10 redraft teams just to get good quicker, and the rest is history.
So you've got a really strong sports background. Have you ever given any thought? You know, the NFL just hired their first female woman who is in the officiating pool. Ever given any thought to that?
Well, at this point in my life, no. I've got a very good career, and I was doing the youth sports mainly because I love children and I love sports, and it was a great combination. It was a good way to give back to my community. I did coach at the middle school level, which was a paid position, and loved it. But once I moved into the South from the North, I traveled too much for work. I can't really do anything like that.
Well, that makes sense, and if you're happy doing what you're doing, that's certainly a great thing, and so I can understand that. All right, so you're very, it's interesting. You've got a pretty diverse background, and I'm always so happy to meet other women who enjoy sports and other things. Do you have any particular preference when it comes to the types of leagues that you play in? I know you do a lot of different types.
I do. I got into Dynasty in 2014, and once I found that avenue, I still play redraft, but Dynasty is now my number one fantasy football passion. And what I like about it is the variety of different types of leagues that they have and different formats. And like I said, I'm very strategical, so I look for the deeper leagues and the strategy like the Devy leagues where you can draft guys out of college, and then when they make it into the NFL, they're automatically on your roster. And any kind of format that's a little outside the box where you have to do your own work and you just can't go and get the rankings and still be successful. I like to do the extra work behind the scenes. And so the more complicated, like IDP, which is individual defensive players, and just
those are my favorite.
Yeah, I like the ones that have a little extra complication or a little different scoring setting.
Now, for those who might not know, can you explain Devy leagues? What that means? Some people are just standard football players.
Sure. So you still draft the regular NFL team, and then you have a separate Devy draft, which is developmental, and you're drafting guys right out of college. So you can draft anywhere from incoming college freshmen all the way to guys that are seniors this year, and you can draft any position that you want. Most of those leagues have a taxi squad, so they don't take up active roster spots, and they sit on your taxi squad until they make it to the NFL. If they don't, you can drop them at any time. You can trade the players at any time. And if they do make it into the NFL and you're so lucky to get an Ezekiel Elliott that's a first-round rookie pick, but you got him 60th overall in 2014 draft, then you kind of hit the lottery. So it's fun because the scouting really comes into play where you get to watch the Saturday games and kind of project who you think is going to be a good NFL player.
See, I think I might enjoy that. How many Devy players are you allowed typically?
Well, it's a wide variety. If you want to dip your toe in real lightly, they have where you have one Devy player, and you can go as deep as I've got one where we can have 30 on our taxi squad, but you draft 20, and then each year you get 6 more. So you can trade the picks just like you can any commodity, and you can trade the players just like any other commodity as well.
Very interesting.
I like the deeper ones because then you can really start getting into guys like Noah Brown from Ohio State that a lot of people aren't even talking about. But he will be buzzed this year. He broke his ankle last year right before the first practice. You might not have heard of Michael Thomas from Ohio State if Noah Brown hadn't got injured last year. But be on the lookout for him, for example. He's going to be one of those up-and-comers out of the blue.
Yeah. The super flex leagues, now explain that for people who might not be familiar.
Okay, so in most leagues you start one quarterback. A super flex, you can start a quarterback in that flex position. And since the quarterback scores the most points on a weekly basis, they've got the best floor and the best ceiling for points, you're going to want to have at least 2 quarterbacks that are starters in the NFL. And a lot of times you're going to have 3 or 4. In a super flex, it's very easy to see a guy like Chase Daniel on somebody's roster. And then when you get news like we did today, all of a sudden he's gold.
Yeah. Yeah, we're about to turn our attention to. I want to ask you some questions about this trade. By the way, I'm talking with Katie Flowers at FF Skylar. We'll be tweeting out her Twitter handle here when we get through with this. It's interesting. Philadelphia and Minnesota, their offenses were already kind of interesting to me anyway because of their situations. People were avoiding. I really like Teddy Bridgewater, but people were avoiding him in fantasy. He didn't have the best fantasy season at all last year. It was really all about their run game. But I had, and I don't own any Teddy shares, but boy, I had some Stephon Diggs shares, and when Teddy went down, I was gulping really hard. And then on the flip side, Philadelphia, they're just a mess. And really, I think I maybe have one Jordan Matthews share. I've got Darren Sproles in some leagues. What do you think? What do you make of this trade, first of all, and which team do you think is going to benefit the best from it?
I think they both benefit, and probably pretty equally. Carson Wentz is the quarterback for Philadelphia for the now and the future. Chase Daniel is going to be a stopgap, and he's a viable enough stopgap. He's as good as Sam Bradford in the minds of Philadelphia. Why not recoup a first-round pick and get a future fourth-round pick and get rid of the crybaby whiner, the glass jaw, the glass guy, Sam Bradford? I'm not a big Sam Bradford fan. He makes so much money for doing nothing. And I'm kind of glad for the Vikings in that if he does succeed, they're not going to lose their win now window. And that's what I think this trade is all about. They don't believe that Sean Hill is going to get them through the entire season and through the playoffs. They believe that they're a contender, a championship type team, and I believe that they are. And so if Sam Bradford can go in there and learn the offense and be just average, the rest of the team, Adrian Peterson, they don't want to lose his window. He's getting of the age where it could be any time now. They've got a great defense. I love their coach, and they've got a lot of young wide receivers and depth surrounding them. So for them, it's not saying we don't think Teddy's coming back so much as it's saying we want to win now. We've got that type of team, so let's do what we can to ensure that.
Oh wait, I just saw something come across the timeline. Let me see. It sounds like Carson Wentz may move up. Might not be about Chase Daniels. Yeah, it's there were people speculating that maybe Teddy's injury is more serious than what they're letting on. Uh, if you think I'm sorry, but if you think that Sam Bradford is your to me he's only a stopgap kind of guy, a guy that's gonna maybe get you through the year, and they've got a strong team. There's talent around him. This might be one of the most talented teams he's ever played on. What do you think about that?
No, I agree with that assessment completely. And I think that Sam Bradford just lives in a world where he's just totally blessed and doesn't get it. I just hope that I mean, I'm serious. To make millions of dollars, how many touchdowns has he thrown? I mean, he came out of Oklahoma and looked really good, and everybody had such high hopes for him, and he's done nothing but disappoint. I don't think that fantasy-wise, in a regular start one quarterback league, you're going to want Sam Bradford on your team. But as far as the real live Minnesota Vikings, as long as he's average, they've got enough around him that they can win despite him and not because of him.
Yeah, I completely agree. If there's nobody with any fantasy football sense is rushing out to pick up Sam Bradford. But it does
I mean,
make
if you're in a super flex or beyond, then yes, absolutely you're going to want Sam Bradford, but not in a start one quarterback league.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if he has any. I'll have to look and see if anybody. I'm sure somebody. The people did draft him in some of my leagues. Yeah, it makes me feel a lot better about Stephon Diggs. And do you think that it changes Adrian Peterson's projections at all?
Well, just like with Sean Hill at the helm, and I think that Sean Hill will get at least the first few weeks before Bradford is acclimated and can take over, if he even does acclimate. And I still question that. But I think that they were going to run a lot anyway. And your statement earlier about Teddy Bridgewater, I think a lot of it is perception. I like Teddy Bridgewater. Guys develop at different paces. And
they
if
really
you look
do.
at Russell Wilson, if you look at Russell Wilson, his first few years in the league, he was handing the ball off a lot to Marshawn Lynch, and now he's older and stronger and more confident in the offense. Yeah. Right. And so I think that Teddy Bridgewater was ascending, and that he hasn't hit his fantasy peak or his NFL peak yet. And I'm really just awful. I feel awful for him for this injury. And it's going to be a long ways back. He may not be ready for the beginning of next year, which is, again, the insurance that they got with a veteran guy like Sam Bradford. And, again, I just hope that he doesn't disappoint like he has every place else that he's been.
I know. Well, in all fairness, too, and these are things that you can't predict and you can't insure against, and that's injury. And, he's had a lot of injuries, and in a way, and I think Carson Palmer's a better quarterback, but in a way his situation does sort of remind me of Carson Palmer, who, was looking really good before he had his first injury with the Bengals in Cincinnati. And, then he had a few struggle years, and now, he's got he's settled in. He's got talent around him in Arizona, and it's hard for a quarterback to, especially one who's trying to come back from injury and what have you, to carry a team, especially a bad team.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And there's so many different factors involved. Everybody learns at different rates, and sometimes if you get bashed like early and often and beaten to a pulp, it's hard mentally to come back from that. And these guys, they all work hard to be an NFL player to begin with. It's such a grind just to get there and to maintain it and to stay there. So, I call him a whiner and a crybaby and things like that, but he is still very talented.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, so far, he hasn't capitalized on his opportunities, and I hope him the best. I hope that for Minnesota's sake, they got a bargain.
Yeah, on the other side, Philadelphia. I just, and I like Doug Peterson. I like that he got a lot of grief for the offense that he ran in Kansas City, but I mean, they've been pretty successful and have made the playoffs under him and had made the playoffs under him. Uh, The quarterback situation, though, maybe it does. Maybe Carson Wentz is going to be ready sooner rather than later. Chase Daniel, Mizzou grad, a guy who's somewhat legendary, I suppose, in fantasy football Twitter. To me, I have more concerns about their situation than I do the Vikings, but I would have said that regardless.
Yeah, Philadelphia is one of those teams that's still trying to find their identity. They're still in flux big time. They've got some nice pieces. I think that this move will just solidify Ryan Matthews, and I think that Jordan Matthews, he's one of my guys that I like so much in Dynasty because he is such a hard worker. He's a nose to the grindstone type of guy that's going to go out
like
there and run jugs machines 100 times, just to continue to practice his route running and his catching and everything. And he's going to raise up his teammates and step up and be a leader. I think this is good for Zach Ertz and Selleck as far as their tight ends. They don't have much. They're still trying to find who's going to be that wide receiver too in that offense. There's so many puzzle pieces that for them to recoup a first-round pick and a fourth-round pick, and Bradford wasn't the right fit for them anyway. So why not?
Yeah, he really wasn't.
And get, he wasn't the answer. So why
but
not
he never
go
was.
take your lump?
Even when Chip Kelly was their coach, he wasn't. It was just that was such an odd fit from day one.
Yeah, I agree.
You mentioned Jordan. You mentioned Ryan Matthews. I'm going to get my Matthews mixed up. I agree with you, by the way. I love Jordan Matthews. I got to see him a lot when he played at Vandy. There were reports out of Philly camp that Ryan Matthews had sort of been outpaced, I suppose. Basically, that Darren Sproles was the best running back in camp, and that he might be the de facto starter, even though when you look at depth charts, you do see Ryan Matthews there. What do you make of that situation?
Well, again, I love Darren Sproles, and even though he's one of the older guys, Ryan Matthews is more of the between the tackles type runner. So I think it's going to continue to be running back by committee with a hefty dose of both of those guys. And Darren Sproles with his ability to catch, and he's still got the speed, and he's still got that wiggle. I like him in as a later round. If you're going like zero running back, he's one of the guys to target.
Yeah. Kind of like Danny Woodhead, although I guess Danny Woodhead maybe is a little bit higher up. I don't know.
Yeah.
Speed, and it's interesting if you play in a league where you get, points for, special team points, yardage, and what have you. It looks like he's still going to be in the mix at their return position.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's just one of those guys that just doesn't age.
Huh. Yeah, I like him so much, and the concern. Of course, the concern is double edged because of Ryan Matthews' injury history, and he's been a little bit unfairly tagged, and I've certainly contributed to that. But with that injury prone label, but it's you have to have concerns about whether he's going to be on the field, but for Sproles, he's not an every down back, and so
he's not. That's right.
Yeah, and so it is a situation where you have to monitor carries and looks and touches, and try to figure out who the guy is and what value to put on it. The Titans traded with Philadelphia for Daniel Kelly, gave them Dorial Beckham-Green, who is a guy that fantasy football Twitter loves him, draft Twitter loved him, but he's never been able to really put it together in the league. He had the off the field concerns that kept him out of football for a year. It's we're seeing the DGB hype. Dorial, did I say it wrong again? Dorial Green Beckham.
Yeah,
I
you did.
always get,
Yeah,
I
that's
always do that, and I'm trying to correct myself. I'm trying to relearn how DGB, trying to relearn it. But I'm avoiding him because I just don't have any faith or confidence. Do you think that? First of all, what are your thoughts on DGB, and are you looking at him at all in your fantasy drafts?
in redraft, no, because there's a lot of other guys at his ADP that I think have more upside, and I would watch him on the waiver wire. I don't think he's being picked up in redraft pretty much anywhere, and you can still get him halfway through the season if he's starting to look good. But in Dynasty, I'm going to hold him. You can't coach 6'5", 240 with skills like he's got. He's got a head that he's got to work on. He's got things between the ears that he's got to get right, and that could take years. Adjusting to the NFL, especially after skipping a year of college and with the issues that he's had, I'm not going to give up on his overt talent in Dynasty. I'm going to be holding on to him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's an interesting trade, an interesting situation for Minnesota. I'm certainly hoping that Teddy Bridgewater can come back. What other guys are you targeting, and then we'll talk about guys that you're avoiding.
Okay, well, first of all, in redraft leagues, I'm targeting DeMarco Murray somewhere around round 5, round 6, depending.
Okay.
I think that he is going to have an outstanding season in the Mike Mularkey offense and that erotic smash mouth that you coined so well the other day. I think they're going to feed him early and often. He's a great pass-catching running back as well as between the tackles, and Mularkey likes to have his bell cow, and I think he's found him. So I am targeting, and I really, really like DeMarco Murray this year. Devin Funchess, he's got a late-round ADP of 118. I think that he could be this year's Allen Robinson in that his ADP is far exceeded by what he ends up scoring for you. I would pick him up in redraft leagues as well as hang on to him in
I own some Devin. I own quite a few Devin Funchess shares as well, and you're right, the ADP is, reports out of camp on him or that, he might surpass Kelvin Benjamin. I really doubt that, but definitely, we saw in the preseason that he's going to get serious work, and he's, in my opinion, looking a lot better than he did last year. Rookies are going to struggle, and I'll buy into rookie running backs before I will buy into typically rookie. We'll talk about Tabe Sharp here in a minute.
Your baby.
And my baby, who might be, because you mentioned DeMarco Murray, and I want to talk about Derrick Henry, and you can't talk about Derrick Henry without talking about my bae, Tabe Sharp. So,
if you really want me to go there, I will. But I like Funchess. I like Funchess better than Kelvin Benjamin, partly because of his ADP, but also Benjamin's still working out the kinks from that ACL. He's on a snap count. His conditioning isn't up to speed. He could easily tweak or re-injure and then be out. But even if he's in, I think he's going to be the guy that gets double teamed, leaving Funchess to roam around wide open. Got one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. I just love the Devin Funchess shares, as many as I can get.
Yeah, I think I only have like maybe one or two. I don't own very much Kelvin Benjamin. I just think he's such a problem. You mentioned DGB's size and measurables, and you can't coach what Kelvin Benjamin is either. And
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I watched the film of the Titans game, and he's such a problem. He'll get as many red zone targets as they can get him, and it's very exciting. We had a lot of fun in this live draft. Everybody was making fun of me because I paid so much for Tabe Sharp and Derrick Henry. I do not care. No regrets, zero regrets. I do tend to stay away from rookies because it's and I will go with running backs usually a lot quicker than I will wide receivers. But with Tabe Sharp, and I think he's an exception simply because he's such a great route runner, and you don't have any issues with that. And he's been the most dependable wide receiver for the Titans, basically since he joined the team. And the hype is real. Now, we can talk about values and what have you. And then just real briefly, and we'll let Katie weigh in on this. By the way, I'm talking with Katie Flowers at FF Schuyler out there on Twitter. Derrick Henry is another interesting guy. You mentioned DeMarco Murray, and he's looked really good in the Titans offense. Erotic smash mouth, it's real. I just filed an article for Inside the Pylon. Exotic smash mouth. It's a love story. It's a story about what the Titans could be this season. They're going to get Derrick Henry in there. He's going to get as much work as they can give him. It's a two-headed monster. The Titans offense might actually be good this year.
They're looking better. I don't know that I think that it's going to be a running back by committee. It may be like a 70-30 type split. I think a lot of people are expecting Henry to get a lot more equal carries. I don't see that happening, but it could happen, and I could be wrong. But it's the same thing with Tajay Sharp. What I did like about him in preseason is he is such a good route runner, and he was reliable for Marcus Mariota to target, and he would know that he was going to be there. And he has shown good hands and shown everything that you would want to see in a rookie in preseason. But it's also preseason, and I'm going to temper expectations.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I've seen him, originally in Dynasty, he was going mid to late third round, and I've seen him now going in the first round of some of the later Dynasty rookie drafts, and that to me is a bit nuts. I think mid-second, okay, but first round, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all about value, and
right.
if you've played fantasy football for any length of time, you know that, and you understand that it's it is a numbers game. And I agree, you can take too much out of the preseason, but I do think that it's informative. It's not something to be. Yeah, it's not something to be ignored. It's definitely informative. We'll see how that goes. I can't wait for my article to drop. It was really interesting looking at the Titans numbers. So I don't want to make this a Titans podcast. I want to ask you, what other deep sleepers are out there? What other guys do you watch? And then we're going to talk a little bit about DFS, and then I'll let you go back to enjoying your vacation.
Well, that sounds good because, yes, I've got a picnic at my cousin's I've got to run off to very soon here. But I like Jamison Crowder, wide receiver, Washington. His ADP is 283. He's not being drafted in redraft leagues right now, but is somebody that you want to keep on your waiver wire speed dial. Receiver core, you can go pick him up. He would be a valuable asset. Kamar Aiken, he's not super deep, but he's at 141. And in Baltimore, Joe Flacco likes to throw the ball a lot, and so does Trestman. That offense is going to move, and so I think that he is going to get targeted heavily. As far as tight end sleepers, I like Lance Kendricks, LA Rams, free or very late if you want to wait on tight end. Some running backs that could pop this year that are cheap or that you want to keep. Vikings.
I think
he's got enough PPR juice to work on his own without an Adrian Peterson injury. But if AP gets injured, I think Jerick McKinnon just skyrockets in value.
I love him.
Jordan Howard. Yeah, he's great, isn't he? Jordan Howard in Chicago, I don't think that Jeremy Langford has the greatest lock on that position. He will be the starter on day one, but Jordan Howard has shown some juice in preseason. Yeah. And at ADP of 210, he's somebody that you could easily stash. I think Ken Dixon, even though he's injured right now, he's not somebody that you necessarily want to pick up because most times in redraft you only have 6 or 7 bench spots. But keep your eye on Ken Dixon in Baltimore as a running back. He is somebody that can catch out of the backfield, and I think that he can easily overcome whether it's Forsett or Terrence West or whoever. By mid-season, you may want to be looking up Ken Dixon.
Yeah, the Jeremy Langford situation in Chicago is interesting. I own so many Jeremy Langford shares. getting a little nervous about it. But the thing, and I meant to ask you this before, and we'll skip the DFS thing for today. I know you need to go. Do you have any strategies that you employ when you use the waiver wire, and what do you recommend for fantasy football players out there in terms of waiver wires?
Well, you need to be proactive. My teams tend to be very strong, and so I have very low waiver priority. So I don't want to wait until he gets off the waiver, because then he's going to be hot for everybody else, and somebody else has a higher waiver priority. I have to think like a chess, 4 or 5 moves ahead. And so if it's getting towards the playoffs and my running backs have gone through their bye week, and I can drop the backup of somebody and pick up a guy that I think is climbing his own depth chart and about to hit, like last year, David Johnson. I didn't draft him in redraft, but I had my eye on him all year long. And about 2 weeks before he went off, I picked him up off waivers, and at that point, things had solidified, and I knew who was who, and I could afford the bench spot. And those are the kinds of things you have to think ahead and plan.
You do. Yeah, I agree. You have to be proactive, and you have to be, you have to keep an eye on the waiver wire, and always staying ahead of the curve is a great way to work it, and if you're flexible, if your roster is flexible enough, I'll stream waivers. I'll pick some guys up to stash them. And if it doesn't turn out, you have to be flexible enough to be able to walk away, too.
Oh, absolutely.
And
there are times also for the waiver wire where I'll pick up somebody proactively because I think they're going to pop, not necessarily because I want to use them, but to keep them away from my weaker team that I'm going to be playing. So you've got to use the waiver wire to your advantage as much as you can. And don't, like you said, don't be afraid to make moves. I stream my defense. I stream my kicker. I don't worry about, at the beginning of the year, they're the last priority of the guys I draft.
Yeah, I'll stream defenses and kickers too, as long as I'm not in like a 16 league, deep league where, you run into trouble with those situations. But yeah, typically I'll do that as well. Katie, it was so much fun. Thank you so much for joining me.
I know
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I had a great time. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, I hope you'll come back.
Oh, of course, anytime. Tell me when.
Okay. Well, have a great rest of your vacation. Tell everybody out there where they can find you on social media.
Sure. So on Twitter, it's at @FF_Skyler399. And my written and other premium podcasts can be found at uthdynasty.com.
Very good. Thanks again for joining me. Have a great day.
Great. Thanks.
All right.